The whisper in the hall. The afternoon was calm inside Windsor Castle. Sunlight filtered through tall stained glass windows, painting colors across the marble floors. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and flowers from the Queen's garden. For most visitors, it was a peaceful sight. But for Royal Guard James Whitmore, peace was part of his duty. James stood at his post near the Queen's private corridor, motionless as a statue. His uniform was sharp, his rifle gleaming, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He had served for 9 years and never once broken protocol. To him, silence was a language of loyalty. But that day, silence became something dangerous. As the castle's echo carried soft footsteps down the long corridor, James's attention sharpened. 2 familiar voices approached, Queen Camilla and her personal secretary Margaret. It wasn't unusual for them to pass by. The Queen often moved quietly between her private office and the royal quarters. But this time their tones were not calm. They whispered quickly, almost angrily. At first, James tried not to listen. Guards were trained not to overhear royal matters. But when Camilla's words grew sharper, he couldn't help catching fragments of their conversation. "She needs to be kept out of the ceremony," Camilla said, her voice low but cold. "It's time people learned their place. Even a child should understand that." James blinked once, uncertain. She? Who was she talking about? Then Margaret hesitated before replying. "Your Majesty, removing her will raise questions." "The press," Camilla cut her off. "Let them question. Princess Charlotte will not be in that photograph beside me. Do you understand? I want her removed from the event list immediately." James's heartbeat stumbled. Princess Charlotte, the young daughter of Prince William and Kate. The little girl who waved shyly at the guards during family outings, who always thanked them with a smile when passing by. James remembered how she once offered him a small paper crown she had made during a royal charity day. "You can be my guard," she had said with a giggle. Now that same girl was being deliberately excluded, ordered away. James's grip on his rifle tightened slightly. He forced himself to remain still, but his mind began to race. Was this a misunderstanding? Maybe the Queen meant something else. A schedule change, a safety concern. But her tone carried too much venom, too much pride. The corridor grew silent again as the 2 women walked past, their heels clicking sharply against the stone. Camilla's perfume lingered faintly in the air, a soft scent that now carried a heavy meaning. James swallowed hard, feeling the weight of what he had just heard pressing against his chest. He was not supposed to react. Guards were trained to be invisible, to see everything yet say nothing. But his conscience stirred painfully. He had always believed that the Royal Guard existed not just to protect bodies, but to protect the dignity of the monarchy. And what he had just heard, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel royal. Minutes passed like hours. James's thoughts grew louder in the silence. The corridor seemed to close in around him. His training told him to ignore it. His heart told him otherwise. He could still hear Camilla's words echoing in his mind. Remove her from the event list. For a moment, James allowed himself to look toward the grand staircase that led to the children's wing. Somewhere up there, Princess Charlotte was probably studying with her tutor or playing with her brothers. Completely unaware that someone she trusted had just decided to erase her from something important. James shifted slightly, his boot brushing against the floor. A guard nearby glanced at him, confused by the tiny movement. James quickly straightened again. He couldn't afford to show doubt. Every second felt heavier, every breath more deliberate. He wanted to convince himself this wasn't his concern, that he was overreacting. But something about the Queen's tone had struck a nerve. He had served under 3 monarchs and seen how power could twist even the gentlest intentions. He had promised himself he would never stand silent if it meant seeing someone innocent hurt, even if that someone was a princess. As the castle bells rang softly to signal the next hour, James's mind reached a breaking point. His loyalty to duty clashed with his loyalty to truth. Could he tell anyone? Could he even hint at what he had heard without risking everything, his job, his honor, maybe even his freedom? He took a slow breath, steadying his heartbeat. For now, he had to think. Carefully, quietly. The Queen's order might already be in motion. Somewhere in the royal office, her assistant might be changing Charlotte's schedule. deleting her name from the official ceremony list. The thought made his stomach turn. James glanced toward the portraits that lined the hall, generations of royals looking down in silent judgment. Their painted eyes seemed to ask him the question he dreaded most. Will you do nothing? Outside, the sun had begun to fade. The golden glow through the windows shifted to a deep orange, washing the corridor in a solemn light. It felt almost like the castle itself was holding its breath. In that moment, James made a quiet vow to himself. He didn't know how or when, but he would find a way to make sure Princess Charlotte stayed safe, not just from danger, but from those who might use power against her. He didn't yet realize that this small act of conscience would soon place him at the center of a royal storm, one that would test his loyalty, his courage, and his very future as a royal guard. The Forbidden Order that night. Windsor Castle glowed under the silver light of the moon. Most of the royal staff had gone home, and the corridors were silent except for the faint ticking of a clock. But Royal Guard James Whitmore could not sleep. The words he had overheard from Queen Camilla still echoed inside his head. Remove Princess Charlotte from the event. He had stood in the same hallway for years, watching history unfold quietly from the shadows. He had seen kings and queens smile for cameras, comfort crowds, and wave to cheering citizens. But he had also seen the darker moments, the ones hidden behind palace walls where politics whispered louder than truth. Tonight felt different. It wasn't about power or scandal. It was about a child, a kind, innocent girl who trusted everyone in that castle, including him. James sat on his narrow bunk in the guard quarters, his uniform neatly folded beside him. The faint hum of the heating system filled the silence. Across the room, another guard snored softly, unaware of the storm brewing inside James's mind. He stared at his gloved hands. They were hands trained to protect the royal family, not interfere in their private matters. Yet, the thought of Princess Charlotte's smile being erased from that ceremony made his chest tighten painfully. He whispered to himself, "What am I supposed to do?" His conscience answered with silence. The next morning, James reported for duty near the royal scheduling office, a coincidence that now felt like fate. The office was a quiet corner of the castle, where every royal engagement was carefully planned. Ceremonies, appearances, and events were arranged down to the last detail. Inside, staff members typed rapidly, sorting through schedules, invitation lists, and photographs. James stood near the door, appearing as motionless as ever, but his ears caught a few words that froze his heart. "Remove her name," said Margaret, the Queen's secretary. "The Queen's orders. Princess Charlotte won't be attending the coronation rehearsal. Replace her with Lady Louise." The words hit him like a blow. It wasn't a misunderstanding after all. The Queen's order was real. He watched as Margaret handed a printed list to another aide. "Make sure this is updated on the official schedule before tomorrow morning," she said quietly. James's throat went dry. He could feel his pulse hammering beneath his collar. The guard beside him shifted slightly, unaware of what was unfolding a few feet away. James wanted to shout, to say this was wrong, but he couldn't. A guard speaking without permission could be dismissed instantly, even arrested under royal security protocol. So he stood there silent, his face expressionless, but inside, something broke. Later that afternoon, while walking the inner courtyard, James saw Princess Charlotte herself. She was with her nanny, chasing a small red ball across the grass. Her laughter filled the cold air like music. She tripped once, then looked up at James with a grin. "Good afternoon, Guard James," she called cheerfully. James managed a faint smile. "Good afternoon, Your Royal Highness," she giggled. "You don't have to call me that." Then she whispered, "You can just call me Charlotte." The warmth of her innocence struck him harder than any command. How could he stay silent now? As she ran back toward the palace, her tiny figure wrapped in a blue coat, James felt something change inside him. His loyalty had always belonged to the crown, but now it belonged to something purer, the truth. That night, he returned to his quarters but didn't remove his uniform. He sat on his bed, staring at the floor. He thought of all the rules drilled into him during his years of service. A guard observes. A guard never interferes. A guard speaks only when spoken to. But what if those very rules protected injustice? What if silence made him an accomplice? He remembered the words of his late father, also a soldier. Son, real loyalty isn't about following orders. It's about protecting what's right. Those words echoed louder than any royal command. By midnight, James had made a decision, one that could destroy his career forever. He would find a way to let someone know what was happening, not in a way that would cause scandal or harm, but quietly, through the right person. Someone who could protect Charlotte without exposing the guard who had overheard the Queen. He thought carefully. Speaking directly to Prince William was impossible. Guards never approached senior royals uninvited, but William's personal aide, a man named Thomas Hale, sometimes passed through the courtyard to check security posts. Hale was trusted by the family and known for his integrity. If James could somehow deliver the message discreetly to him, maybe, just maybe, it could reach the prince in time. The next morning, as James stood at his new post near the West Wing, he saw Thomas Hale walking briskly toward the carriage entrance. Heart pounding, James made his move. He waited until Hale paused to check his watch, then saluted sharply. "Good morning, sir," James began. His voice was steady, but his palms were sweating. "I've overheard something you may need to know. Something that concerns the young princess." Hale frowned, looking around. "This isn't the place to talk, guard. You know the rules." James nodded. "I know, sir. But this isn't gossip. It's a matter of fairness and protection." There was a long pause. Hale studied his face, the sincerity, the risk in his eyes, and finally gave a slight nod. 5 minutes. Meet me by the chapel entrance at 1600 hours. For the first time in his career, James broke protocol knowingly. It wasn't out of rebellion. It was out of duty to something deeper than law. He walked back to his post with a mix of fear and relief. He knew there was no turning back now. Whatever happened next could change everything, not just for him, but for the royal family itself. The moral dilemma. The next day dawned grey and heavy, with clouds hanging low over Windsor Castle. Rain tapped softly against the windows, as if nature itself shared the tension inside those old stone walls. Royal Guard James Whitmore stood near the chapel gate, where he had agreed to meet Thomas Hale, Prince William's personal aide. His uniform was immaculate, but his mind was anything but calm. He had broken one of the oldest rules of service: never involve yourself in royal affairs. Every tick of his watch made his heart beat faster. If anyone discovered his plan, he could lose everything: his rank, his pension, his honor. And yet, the thought of doing nothing felt worse. When Thomas finally appeared, his steps were quick and cautious. He glanced around before approaching James. "All right, guard," he said in a low voice. "You asked for 5 minutes. Speak." James swallowed hard. "Sir, I overheard something 2 days ago. The Queen Consort. She gave an order to remove Princess Charlotte from the coronation rehearsal." Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. "Remove her? Are you certain?" James nodded. "Yes, sir. I was stationed near her corridor. She said it directly, that Charlotte should not appear beside her at the ceremony. Yesterday her secretary confirmed it." Thomas frowned deeply, rubbing his chin. "That's a serious accusation, guard. Do you realize what you're implying?" "Yes, sir," James replied quietly. "And I know my duty is to stay silent. But my conscience doesn't allow it." Thomas studied him for a long moment. "You understand? If this gets traced back to you, your career is finished." "I understand, sir," James said. "But I also understand what's right. She's just a child. She doesn't deserve this." Thomas sighed and nodded slowly. "I'll look into it. Say nothing of this to anyone. You've done your part. Now let me handle the rest." And with that he turned and walked away, disappearing down the misty corridor. For the rest of the day, James felt both lighter and heavier at once. Lighter because he had spoken up. Heavier because now he had to live with the fear of being caught. Every footstep in the hallway sounded like it was coming for him. Every passing superior's glance felt sharper than usual. By evening he couldn't eat. He sat in the guards' dining hall, staring at his untouched plate, while the others chatted about football and royal duties. "Oi, Whitmore," one of them joked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." James forced a smile. "Just tired, mate." But inside he wasn't tired, he was terrified. What if Thomas had told the wrong person? What if Camilla found out? The Queen had power that reached further than anyone could imagine. He excused himself early and stepped outside into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, but the ground still glistened. He walked along the courtyard, the faint scent of wet grass calming him slightly. Above him, the castle lights glowed like watchful eyes. He wondered if anyone else inside those walls ever questioned what was right or wrong. Did they all just obey orders and pretend not to see the cracks forming beneath the crown? Suddenly, James heard soft footsteps. He turned and froze. It was Margaret, Queen Camilla's secretary. She smiled thinly. "Good evening, Guard Whitmore. Out for some fresh air?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied, trying to sound calm. She studied him for a moment. "You were stationed outside Her Majesty's corridor 2 days ago, correct?" James's chest tightened. "Yes, ma'am." "Standard assignment." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Interesting. The Queen mentioned she thought someone might have overheard a private conversation that day. I trust that wasn't you?" James forced his face into a mask of discipline. "No, ma'am. I only do my duty." She held his gaze for a long, silent moment before nodding. "Good. Loyalty is a rare thing, Guard. I do hope you remember who you serve." Then she walked away, her heels echoing down the stone path like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something inevitable. James exhaled shakily. She knew. Somehow she knew. That night sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Margaret's cold stare and heard her voice again. "Remember who you serve." He turned over in his bed, staring at the ceiling. Who did he serve, really? The Queen? The royal system? Or the truth? He remembered Charlotte's laughter, the way she had said, "You can just call me Charlotte." She didn't care about ranks or titles. She only cared about kindness. That memory anchored him, reminded him why he had taken the risk. Around midnight, the door to the guard quarters creaked open. James sat up instantly. Another guard stepped inside. "Message for you, Whitmore." From the prince's aide. James's heart leapt. He took the small envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Your information was correct. The matter has been addressed. For now, stay silent. You did the right thing." Relief washed over him like warm sunlight breaking through clouds. Princess Charlotte was safe, for now. The forbidden order had been stopped before it could take effect, but the note didn't end there. Below the message in smaller writing were 3 chilling words. "You've been noticed." James read it again and again. Noticed? By whom? The Queen? Her staff? The royal office? He folded the note and hid it in his locker, his hands trembling. The relief he felt a moment ago turned into dread. He realized that while he had done the right thing, it had placed him in the shadows of something far more dangerous. From that night onward, every step he took in the castle halls felt watched. Every whisper in the distance made him flinch. He had chosen conscience over silence, but conscience came with a price, and deep down, James knew this was only the beginning. The palace had secrets far darker than one forbidden order, and now he was entangled in them. The risky decision morning sunlight spilled through the castle windows, glimmering against the armor of the royal guards lined up in perfect symmetry. To anyone watching, it was another ordinary day of royal duty, crisp uniforms, silent discipline, perfect order, but for James Whitmore, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Since the night he received that note, "You've been noticed," every second had felt like walking through a trap. The corridors seemed narrower, the air colder. The stares of the senior officers lingered longer than before. He knew the message meant 2 things. Someone powerful knew what he'd done, and someone was watching him. He could only hope it was Prince William and not Queen Camilla. That morning, he was stationed near the Grand Gallery, a corridor filled with portraits of past monarchs. Tourists weren't allowed there, only family members, staff, and guards. It was quiet, too quiet. Halfway through his shift, James noticed something unusual. Two men in black suits, not regular security, passed by, whispering in low tones. They wore badges marked with the royal insignia, but their expressions were cold, analytical. They looked more like investigators than bodyguards. One of them stopped, glancing at James. "Name?" "Guard James Whitmore, sir," he replied sharply. The man nodded but didn't move on immediately. His gaze lingered. "You've served here 9 years, haven't you?" "Yes, sir." The man gave a faint smile. "Good. The Queen values loyalty." James felt a chill run through him. "Of course, sir." The man didn't reply. He just walked away. That short exchange told James everything he needed to know. They were checking on him. When his shift ended, James walked toward the guard quarters, his mind spinning. He couldn't confide in anyone, not his fellow guards, not his superior officers. The walls had ears. He sat on his bunk, his hands trembling slightly. What had he expected? That he could just whisper the truth and walk away untouched? The royal household ran on secrets, and those who exposed them didn't last long. Still, he couldn't regret it. Because of his warning, Princess Charlotte had attended the rehearsal safely, smiling in the official photographs beside her father and mother. The public saw only a happy family. No one knew how close that moment had come to being rewritten. But James knew, and that knowledge came with a burden. That evening, as rain began to fall again, James walked outside for air. The courtyard was quiet except for the soft drumming of raindrops on cobblestones. He thought of his father, a soldier who had served the crown with unwavering faith. His father used to say, "Every man has 2 duties, one to his orders, and one to his soul." James finally understood what that meant. He looked up at the glowing castle windows and whispered, "I did the right thing." "Didn't I?" A voice answered from behind him. "That depends who you ask." James spun around. It was Thomas Hale, Prince William's aide. He stepped out from the shadows, his coat soaked from the rain. James saluted quickly. "Sir," Hale waved it off. "At ease, Whitmore. I just came from Kensington. The prince knows what you did." James's breath caught. "He does?" "Yes," Hale said quietly. "And he's grateful. He told me to tell you this. A true guard protects the heart of the crown, not just the crown itself." Relief spread across James's face. "Thank you, sir. But," Hale added, lowering his voice, "you must be careful. The Queen Consort suspects there was a leak. She's furious, demanding to know who meddled in royal affairs. 2 investigators were assigned this morning to trace the source." James's stomach dropped. "So they know it was me?" "Not yet," Hale said. "But they're close. The Queen believes a guard overheard her conversation. You're one of 3 stationed in that wing that day." "She's narrowing it down," James exhaled slowly. "What should I do?" Hale's eyes hardened. "Stay silent. If they question you, deny everything. Don't speak to anyone about this, not even me. If she confirms it was you, you'll be dismissed at best. Or worse, you'll disappear quietly from royal service altogether." "Disappear?" James asked softly. Hale didn't answer, and that silence said enough. After Hale left, James stood alone in the rain for a long time. The castle loomed above him, beautiful and cruel at once. He realized he was trapped between 2 powers, truth and survival. He had already chosen truth once, but now survival demanded another choice. That night, while others slept, James wrote a letter, one he hoped he'd never have to send. It was addressed to Prince William directly, sealed in a plain envelope. Inside, he described everything he had seen and heard. The Queen's order, the Secretary's confirmation, and his fear for his safety. At the bottom, he wrote, "If anything happens to me, please protect the young princess. She represents the future, the kind that must be guarded, even from within." He folded the letter carefully and slipped it beneath a loose floorboard under his bunk. Days passed. The investigators continued their quiet search. One guard from the same wing was suddenly transferred to Balmoral without explanation. Another was reassigned to Scotland Yard security detail. It was clear. The walls were closing in, but James kept his composure. Each day he stood at his post, unmoving and unreadable. Inside, though, his thoughts churned. He began to notice things, glances exchanged between aides, coded whispers among staff, sealed envelopes that moved through the castle faster than usual. The royal household was hiding something deeper than one forbidden order. He could feel it. Then one evening, a small envelope appeared on his pillow. No name, no seal. Inside, just one line: "You think you saved her, but this isn't over." James looked up, heart pounding. For the first time, he realized he was no longer just a guard. He was part of a secret war inside the palace, one that had only begun, and now he had to make another decision, one even riskier than the last. The confrontation. The palace air was unusually tense that morning. The staff moved faster, quieter. Even the guards stood stiffer, as if the stone walls themselves could feel that something was about to happen. Royal Guard, James Whitmore sensed it too. Every step he took echoed differently. Every passing glance carried a question that no one dared ask aloud. For days, he had lived in fear of that moment. The moment when truth would no longer hide in the shadows. It came sooner than he expected. James was summoned to the command office just after sunrise. The message was short and sharp. "Report immediately. Attendance mandatory." His stomach sank. He'd been called in before for minor briefings or duty updates, but this felt different. There was no warmth in the tone, no routine, just authority. He straightened his uniform, fixed his badge, and marched down the long corridor toward the office. The portraits of monarchs on the walls seemed to watch him as he walked, judging every step. When he entered, 3 people were waiting. Captain Edmund Blake, head of royal security; Margaret, the Queen's secretary; and a man James hadn't seen before, tall, pale, with sharp eyes and a folder in his hand. "Guard Whitmore," Blake said. "Please take a seat." James obeyed, his heart thudding quietly in his chest. The tall man opened the folder. "I'm Sir Philip Graham," he said calmly. "I oversee internal integrity matters for Her Majesty's household." James nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir." Philip studied him for a moment. "Tell me, guard, what do you know about the conversation that took place near the Queen Consort's private corridor last week?" James froze. There it was, the question he'd feared most. "Sir," he said carefully, "as per protocol, I do not listen to private royal discussions." Margaret leaned forward, her voice sharp. "So you deny hearing anything?" "Yes, ma'am," James replied. "My focus was on my post." Philip closed the folder slowly. "Interesting," he said softly, "because we've received word that a member of staff relayed information from that corridor. Information about a private royal decision that was never meant to leave the Queen's office." James swallowed. "Sir, I assure you, I have not shared or repeated any royal conversation." Blake, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "James, you've served with honor for years. If there's something you need to tell us, now's the time. The Queen is upset, but His Royal Highness believes in fairness. You won't be punished for honesty." James looked up at him, meeting his eyes. He could see the conflict in his captain's face. Duty versus decency, the same battle that had torn through his own heart. "I have nothing to confess, sir," James said firmly. "My loyalty remains to the crown." Margaret's lips tightened. "Then I suppose you won't mind surrendering your communication records. Her Majesty wishes to ensure no confidential matters have been discussed beyond these walls." James's chest tightened. That meant his messages, his letters, even the one he had hidden beneath the floorboard. He kept his voice calm. "Of course, ma'am." Philip gave a faint smile. "Good. We appreciate cooperation." He stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "You'll remain on reserve duty until this review concludes, effective immediately." James saluted and left the room without a word. But inside, he knew what it meant. He was being silenced. By noon, his post had been reassigned. His rifle and security key were taken for temporary inspection. He was now officially under review. A polite phrase that really meant under suspicion. The other guards avoided his eyes. Whispers followed him wherever he went. That night, as he sat alone in the quarters, he heard two guards murmuring outside his door. Word is the Queen wants him gone quietly. Prince William's office is protecting him, though. They say he's loyal. Yeah, well, loyalty doesn't matter when you cross the wrong person. James closed his eyes. They were right. He had done the right thing. But right didn't matter anymore. Power did. The next morning brought a surprise. A sealed note was slipped under his door. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Thomas Hale's. Be ready. The prince has requested an internal clarification meeting. You'll be called to testify in person. Do not lie. Trust him. James read the note 3 times. His hands shook slightly. A meeting with Prince William himself. That could change everything or destroy him completely. That evening, James was escorted to a small conference room deep within the West Wing. The air was thick with silence. Inside sat 3 people, Prince William, Thomas Hale, and Captain Blake. Guard Whitmore. The prince began, his tone calm but serious. I understand you were present when the Queen Consort made a certain remark regarding my daughter. James stood perfectly still. Yes, Your Royal Highness. William leaned forward slightly. And you heard her instruct her staff to remove Charlotte from an official appearance? Yes, sir. Why didn't you report this through the proper chain? James took a deep breath. Because, sir, I was afraid it would be buried. I acted only to protect the princess. William's eyes softened for a moment. You realize that what you did could have cost you everything. I do, sir. But I couldn't ignore it. For a few seconds the room was silent. Then William looked at Thomas and gave a small nod. Captain, William said, turning to Blake, Guard Whitmore's integrity is not in question. His actions, though unconventional, came from loyalty, not defiance. Blake nodded slowly. Understood, Your Royal Highness. William stood. Then this matter is closed. There will be no further inquiry. James felt a wave of relief so strong it almost buckled his knees. But before he left, William spoke again. Softer now, almost fatherly. Guard Whitmore, there are battles within these walls that the public will never see. You did the right thing. But from now on, be careful where truth leads you. In this palace, truth can be dangerous. James bowed deeply. Yes, sir. As he stepped out into the cool evening air, the weight on his shoulders began to lift, but only slightly. He knew what the prince had really meant. This victory wasn't the end. It was only a warning, and deep down, James sensed that another storm was coming, one far greater than any he had faced before. The aftermath Windsor Castle stood still beneath a grey English sky. The air was cold, the flags unmoving, and a soft drizzle blurred the morning light. To the outside world, everything looked peaceful. Inside, however, something had changed. Something the newspapers would never write about. Royal Guard. James Whitmore walked across the courtyard in silence, his boots clicking softly on the wet stone. He had been reinstated to duty, but not to his old post. His new station was quieter, the North Gate, far from the royal apartments. A polite way of saying, you're safe, but stay out of sight. Still, he was grateful. After weeks of fear, interrogation, and uncertainty, he was still wearing his uniform. He was still a guard. He had survived. Every morning, James stood at his post from sunrise to noon, greeting visitors, nodding to passing staff, pretending nothing had happened. But inside, he carried the heavy knowledge of what he'd seen, what he'd done, and what it had cost. Sometimes he thought back to that meeting with Prince William. The prince's calm voice still echoed in his mind. In this palace, truth can be dangerous. Those words had stuck to his conscience like a scar, invisible but permanent. And yet, When he saw Princess Charlotte skipping across the courtyard one afternoon, smiling and carefree, he felt that maybe it had all been worth it. She waved when she noticed him. "Hello, Guard James," she called. He smiled faintly. "Good afternoon, Your Highness." She giggled. "I told you, just call me Charlotte." Her laughter was like sunshine after months of rain. James bowed slightly. "Yes, ma'am. Charlotte it is." As she disappeared through the doorway with her nanny, James felt something warm rise in his chest. That small wave, that innocence, reminded him that doing the right thing still mattered, even if no one saw it. Later. That week, he was summoned quietly by Thomas Hale, the prince's aide. They met near the stables, away from cameras and staff. "You've been reassigned," Hale said, handing him an envelope. James hesitated. "Am I being dismissed?" Hale shook his head. "No, promoted, in a way. You'll be transferred to Sandringham Estate, private security detail. Fewer eyes, more privacy. His Royal Highness requested it personally." James blinked in surprise. "The prince wants me there?" Hale nodded. "He trusts you, but listen carefully. This isn't a reward, it's protection. You've made enemies, James, quiet ones. It's best you stay out of sight for now." James accepted the papers. "Understood, sir." Hale placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did something few would dare. You chose truth over silence. But remember, truth inside these walls comes with a price tag, and you've already paid part of it." James nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, I have." His last evening at Windsor was strangely peaceful. He walked the corridors one final time, past the chapel, the gardens, the gallery where he once stood guard. Each corner held a memory, a whisper of what had happened. He paused by a window overlooking the main courtyard, where torches flickered in the soft rain. The castle looked beautiful, but he now saw it differently, not as a monument of power, but as a cage of secrets. He thought of all the faces he had seen, smiling royals, loyal staff, and cold watchers in black suits. Beneath the glamour, they were all prisoners of the same thing, fear of the truth. James exhaled deeply. "Maybe that's why someone has to care," he murmured to himself. "Even if it hurts." The next morning he boarded a black Range Rover bound for Sandringham. The journey was quiet. As the castle faded behind him, he felt a strange mix of sadness and peace. At Sandringham, life was slower. The estate was surrounded by wide fields, trees, and open skies, far from London's noise and politics. Here, James found something he hadn't felt in months: silence without fear. His duties were simple: guarding the gates, assisting during visits, and patrolling the grounds. No royal drama, no whispers of betrayal. Just wind, rain, and the steady rhythm of discipline. Still, every evening he would sit by the edge of the field and think about the castle, the people still trapped in its golden walls. He wondered if Queen Camilla ever thought of him, the guard who overheard her words. He doubted it. People in power seldom remembered those who challenged them. But sometimes, when he looked up at the night sky and saw the distant glow of Windsor's lights on the horizon, he smiled faintly. Because somewhere in that castle, a little princess was sleeping safely, and that was enough. Months later, James received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph: Princess Charlotte, standing proudly beside her father at a public event. She was smiling, holding a small bouquet. Beneath the photo were 5 handwritten words: "She's still beside her family." James's eyes softened. He didn't need to guess who had sent it. The handwriting was unmistakable: Thomas Hale's. He tucked the photo into his uniform pocket and stood up, the cold wind brushing against his face. For the first time in a long while, he felt light. He had lost his place at Windsor, but he had found something far more important: peace with his own conscience. That night, as he finished his patrol, he paused under the moonlight. The air was still, the world quiet. He looked toward the horizon and whispered, "If I had to do it all again, I would." And with that, he turned back toward the manor, his silhouette fading into the silver light of dawn. A soldier not remembered in books or headlines, but one who had silently changed the course of a royal story. Because sometimes the greatest heroes wear no medals. Sometimes they just stand guard and choose what's right when everyone else looks away.